I want you to listen to me very carefully. LGBTQ+. It's feminism coming full circle. I want you to really think about this. And stay until the end of the video, because I will come back to this topic. First of all, what is equality? How can you make XX equal XY? I will never be the same as LeBron James. LeBron James will never be the same as Donald Trump. And Donald Trump will never be the same as Michael Jackson. Twins are different. Siblings are different. Each individual is different in every way, shape, and form possible. And we should celebrate those differences. If you really want equality, women shouldn't have the right to vote. Men earn the right to vote via mandatory military conscription. What did women do? Absolutely nothing. If you really want equality. So, does that mean if a woman punches me in the face, I can punch her back at full force? Is that what you mean? Why does a woman get custody of the child 90% of the time from a divorce? And 97% of alimony is paid from men to women. Does that sound like equality? Are there any feminists in Ukraine? If Xi Jinping and the CCP were to invade Taiwan one day in the future, do you think there will be any feminists on the island of Taiwan? Why do all the men have to stay? Why not to make it 50-50? Are there any feminists on the Titanic? I don't think so. Are there feminists in Kenya, or Ethiopia, or Somalia, or Uganda? Why not make the woman walk 20 miles a day to the well to get water 3 to 4 times a week? Let's balance out the workload. Why force all the workload onto the man? Are there any feminists working as bricklayers, or garbage collectors, or drilling oil rigs in the middle of the ocean? Are there any feminists cleaning out the sewers? Why do they only talk about the executive suites? Over 90% of victims of violent crimes are men. Over 90% of overdose deaths are men. 90% of men will experience domestic violence in marriages and relationships. Over 90% of the homeless population is men. Over 80% of divorce are filed by women. And women will get the house after the divorce in over 80% of the cases. 75 to 80% of suicides worldwide are men. Over 80% of students getting D's and F's in schools are men. Why does nobody ever talk about that? Listen, the wage gap has been debunked so many times. I'm not going to come back to it. But I will say this. What about the industries which women dominate? And they make way more money versus their male counterparts. Why do the female models and the adult film stars that make multiple times, sometimes 10, 20 times the money versus their male counterparts? Why not make that equal? Why are there not any men on OnlyFans that's making $1 million a month? If you want the quotas in workplace, let's look at the nursing industry. Why is the nursing profession 90% women? Why not make it 50-50? In Canada, there's a massive crisis with nurses being burned out, and they're quitting in mass numbers, and there's shortages of nurses everywhere. Why not bring in a quota to make it 50-50 for male nurses? Maybe this is a possible solution to the crisis. Why does nobody ever talk about this? What is diversity, equity, and inclusion? Does that mean I should replace LeBron James or Anthony Davis on the Lakers roster in order to represent the Asian community? Does that mean the NBA should waive off more of their black players for a more diverse league? Because right now there's not enough diversity. If I get 98% average throughout all 4 years of high school, and I apply to every single Ivy League school, and all 8 of them rejects me because I'm Chinese, but a black transgender queer lesbian with a 75% average gets accepted with a full scholarship, does that sound like fairness and equality to you? Well, you might say, oh, that's just ridiculous. I'm not being ridiculous. That is a real policy. In the US, they call it Affirmative Action. Listen, being black is not an accomplishment. Being 2SLGBTQAI+, it's not an accomplishment. The woke left wants everybody to only see color. The only way to move forward is to judge people by their merit and by the contents of their character. That is the only way. Do you know what happens when you try to switch up traditional gender roles and you try to force equality onto people? You have transgender. Hey, the feminists, you asked for it. You wanted gender equality, right? Now you have it. So now you have men identifying as women. They're entering girl sororities at schools. They're entering female sports leagues and locker rooms. They're getting $1 million contracts from Nike, from Bud Light, from Tampax. The winner of Miss Netherlands 2023 is a dude named Ricky. Oh, sorry, did I just misgender someone? Now they want to refer to a real woman as a cis woman. Do you know what the term cis means? The left came up with this term in order to marginalize normal people. See, now I'm not a man anymore, I'm a cis man. I'm being marginalized. They want to call women bleeders, chest feeders, and TERFs. Oh, by the way, you know what the TERF means? It means trans exclusionary radical feminist. Yeah, that's what you are now. You know what? I hope the NCAA encourages more men to transition into women and crush women's sports and win all of their trophies and medals and break every single record there is. And to Miss Netherlands, Ricky, you probably use she, her, or they pronouns. I'll respect your pronouns. You know what? I hope you, Ricky, I hope you win Miss Universe 2023. I hope you will take away the best modeling contracts and the best sponsorships from women. And I hope you will inspire the new generation of young boys into believing that they can also become a strong, confident, and beautiful woman. So I hope you will keep up the great work, Ricky. 38% of children today in the West are being raised by single mothers. 77% of teachers in public schools are women. It's not toxic masculinity that's the problem. It's toxic feminism. Nuclear family equals generational wealth. Asian families have the highest net worth in USA, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, in UK, etc. And for now, they also have the lowest divorce rate. For now, that is. 71% of black children in the US are being raised by single black mothers. Look at how well that has worked out in Chicago, in Philly, in New Orleans, in Detroit, in Memphis, in Baltimore, in Milwaukee, in San Francisco, in Harlem. You want me to keep going on with the list? Listen, single motherhood equals generational poverty. That it's a fact. And the elites know this. That's why they indoctrinated modern women in schools about the victim mentality and oppression. If a woman has a university degree, her odds of a future divorce at some point down the road is over 60%. And during those divorces, they will file for the divorce 90 to 95% of the time. You don't think there's some kind of indoctrination going on? Do you know why so many LGBTQ activists? Do you know why they're pushing their ideologies into schools now? In some cases, as young as daycare and kindergartens. It's because they can't have any children on their own. So they have to come after yours. So how do they come after your children? Once you remove the alpha male, it's very easy to come after the woman and the children. I want you to really think about that when school starts tomorrow. These miserable divorced women, then they go on to tell their daughters to hate men, and they emasculate their sons. After divorce, over 90% of the time, the woman has custody of the children. All three of Megan Fox's sons are now transgender. I'm just going to leave that there. I'm not even going to say anything, okay? So many young men today, especially straight white males, are under constant attack from the left, from the media, to the point some will simply say, you know what, might as well be gay, or be queer, or transgender, or non-binary, or gender fluid, or pangender, or agender, or two-spirited, or gender non-conforming. So after I label myself, now I can also play the victim card. And let's see who is more oppressed. Some will go to the extent of puberty blockers and medically transition, cutting off their genitals. If you hate men so much, well, maybe it's better to live as a woman and blame the patriarchy all day. Or maybe it's time for a woman to take accountability. For example, somebody like Amber Heard. Yes, my dear, you are so oppressed. Oh my God, you're so oppressed. You live in the most equitable, the most just, the most sane, the most privileged society in the history of the world. You have witness testimony, you have cross-examination, you have the First Amendments, you have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and yet you want to destroy everything. You want a communist and socialist reform. Communism has never ever worked out. Even China walked away from it. I want you to remember this. China is capitalist. China is no longer communist. If you hate it so much here, why not move to Afghanistan? I'm sure they preach feminism better over there. Why not go to China and call Xi Jinping a little bitch and see what happens to you? Why not go to Russia and complain about black racism there? Or maybe try to start a coup and board a plane and see what happens. Why don't you go to North Korea and worship the Kim family all day? People want to complain about everything here because the West is the most accepting and the most welcoming society in the world. I am saying this as a Chinese person living in the West. Third wave feminism has completely crushed the white population. The mainstream media wants you to tell you that you need to be a career woman, that you don't need a man, you don't need family, you don't need any children. So you replaced your living room children's playden with an office cubicle. You replaced your loving husband with a douchebag boss. Western countries went from a fertility rate of anywhere between 3 to 5 right after World War II to 1.35 children per woman across the EU today. In Canada, it's 1.43. Remember, the replacement rate is 2.11 per woman. And even these numbers are inflated by immigrants and refugees. If you look at the actual fertility rate for a white European / North American woman, it's somewhere around 1. 20% of Gen Z Americans are LGBTQ+ now. Here's a scenario. If you put 1,000 LGBTQ+ people on the island, you come back 100 years later, I can guarantee you this, you'll find 1,000 dead skeletons. That is a fact. If you put 500 heterosexual men and 500 heterosexual women on another island, you come back in another 100 years, you will find a thriving village, full of life. You want to talk more about feminism? Look at Finland, one of the countries that's most obsessed with feminism and gender equality. Finland has a divorce rate of 55%. 90% of divorces in Finland are filed by the woman. This idea of feminism is self-destructive at its core, and it's an attack on the nuclear family. Look at Canada. Justin Trudeau's cabinet is over 50% women. So is the divorce rate in Canada. And that's for everybody. If you just look at a white couple, it's over 60%. These numbers are making people not to want to commit into a relationship. That's why there are fewer and fewer men looking to enter relationships nowadays. Many are flying overseas to become passport bros. Marriage rates are at an all-time low. Divorce rates are at an all-time high. And fertility rates have never been lower. And because of this, Western countries are forced to take in immigrants and refugees. If you go back 200 years, back in 1800, white people made up 35% of the world's population. Now it's around 12% and constantly shrinking. Now, to all the white people complaining, saying things like, oh, diversity is genocide, all of this BS. Listen, you did this to yourselves. Don't blame the immigrants or refugees. Xi Jinping didn't do this. Mao Zedong didn't do this. Africa didn't do this to you. Latin America didn't do this to you. You did this to yourselves. You have nobody else to blame but yourselves. You guys are the ones pushing feminism and LGBTQ+, not the Asians, not the Muslims, or black people. Now, to the white people out there saying that, oh, Western countries, we can easily self-sustain without the immigrants. For example, nowadays we have robots and AI to replace people. Then let me ask you this. Do those robots pay taxes? How indoctrinated are you? Do those self-checkout counters at Walmart, those kiosks at McDonald's, do they spend money at local shops and local restaurants? Do they buy tickets to see the Taylor Swift concert? Does ChatGPT spend money on makeups or cosmetics? Or do they buy tickets to NBA games and they buy any sports jerseys? Have you really thought about this? A shrinking population is a disaster for the government. Why do you think China is so desperate to reverse the damage done from the one-child policy, which prevented at least 400 million births? Why do you think Japan and South Korea are so desperate to increase their fertility rate? If, let's say, 40 to 50 years from now, a country's population is shrinking and they refuse to take in any immigrants and refugees. For example, look at Japan. That's the best example there is. They have the oldest population in the world. The average age of a Japanese person is 48.4 years old. Think about that. If a generation from now, there are half as many people paying taxes, the government will be forced into deficit. Deficit leads to printing money. Printing money leads to inflation. Inflation leads to debt, and debt leads to default. Have you ever thought about that? You see where this is going, right? If the USA today defaulted its $32 trillion US dollar debt, the world will be entering the Great Depression, way worse than the 1929 stock market crash. Remember, woke, it's China. That's the easiest definition I can give to you. I will come back to this topic in more details. The only way to reverse all of this is say no more to baby mamas. We need to bring back the nuclear family, and it is up to you